All right, let's set the scene. It's the evening of April 4th, 1968. You've got Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. out on the second-floor balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He's just sharing a laugh, a casual moment with his driver down below.
And then, in a split second, everything shatters. A single shot cracks through the air. King is thrown violently backward, a pool of blood instantly spreading around his head. Just minutes later, the voice of the civil rights movement is silenced forever. He's pronounced dead.
So, the official story? It came down fast. The killer was identified as James Earl Ray, a small-time crook, really, with a history of stick-ups. He pleaded guilty, and just like that, the case was stamped closed.
But here's the thing. Was it really that simple? Because almost immediately, Ray took back his confession. And for the last 50-plus years, a mountain of evidence has been piling up, casting some really serious doubt on that neat and tidy lone gunman story.
So, let's break this down, shall we? We're going to start with that official story, the one we all heard. Then we'll look at some very unusual things happening in Memphis right at that time. We're going to poke some serious holes in the evidence, uncover a bizarre Canadian connection, and then we'll end with the big questions that are still just hanging in the air today.
Okay, so first up, the official story. Now, on the surface, you can see why they called it an open and shut case. The evidence against James Earl Ray, it looked absolutely airtight.
I mean, check this out. Ray rents a room with a perfect sniper's view of the motel. A rifle, very conveniently, is found dropped nearby with his fingerprints all over it. And it wasn't just the rifle. It was wrapped up with his personal stuff, like a radio he'd taken during a prison break. Then you've got a witness who says he saw him run, a white Mustang, his car, peeling away, and of course that initial guilty plea. It really did look like a slam dunk.
But then, almost right away, Ray flips. He starts insisting he was just a pawn, a dupe, as he called himself, in this big plot run by some mysterious handler he only knew as Raoul. He spent the rest of his life in prison, fighting for a new trial he never got.
Okay, and this is where the story starts to get, really complicated. To even begin to understand what might have happened, you have to look at the bigger picture. You have to understand the political climate and maybe more importantly, who else was in Memphis on that exact day.
You see, by 1968, Dr. King wasn't just a civil rights leader anymore. His powerful, unwavering stance against the Vietnam War had earned him some very, very powerful enemies. Army intelligence was actively watching him, and they had him labeled as a subversive. There was even this panicked Pentagon report that claimed his upcoming march on Washington was basically a plot to shut down the entire U.S. government. To some people in power, he was a domestic threat.
And get this, just look at the sheer number of covert government agents that were swarming Memphis that day. We're talking Green Berets, literally scouting sniper sites, Army intelligence agents shadowing King's every single move, an 8-man special ops team just there on some mysterious unknown mission. And maybe the craziest part of all, the very first person to reach King's body on that balcony was an undercover cop who had managed to work his way deep into King's inner circle.
So at the exact same time all these agents are flooding into Memphis, King's security just evaporates. Tactical police units that were in the area pulled back. The head detective assigned to protect King suddenly reassigned just hours before the shot. Even the 2 black firemen at the station right next to the motel were told to go home. And after the shot rang out, no lockdown. The streets were left wide open. It was, for all intents and purposes, a perfect escape route.
So you've got this massive, kind of strange military presence and a complete security breakdown. Now, let's look again at the actual physical evidence, because that open and shut case against Ray, it starts to fall apart pretty quick when you look closely. So the entire eyewitness case, it all came down to one guy. His name was Charles Stevens. And his story? Well, he was a chronic alcoholic who later admitted he was way too drunk to really see anything clearly. He even claimed the police pressured him, basically forced him to sign an affidavit identifying Ray. Oh, and his wife, who was right there with him, she was adamant from day one. The man she saw was not James Earl Ray.
And that brings us to one of the biggest paradoxes of this whole thing. So yes, Ray's fingerprints were on the rifle they found on the sidewalk. But inside the rooming house, the supposed sniper's nest, the investigators found nothing. Not a single fingerprint in his room, not on the windowsill, not even on the box of bullets that was found right there with the gun. How is that possible?
Which, leads to a pretty obvious question. I mean, just think about it for a second. Does an assassin, in the middle of a desperate escape, carefully bundle his personal, easily traceable belongings with the murder weapon, and then just drop it all in plain sight for the cops to find? Or does that sound exactly like what you would do if you were trying to frame somebody?
Okay, now we get to what might be the strangest, most compelling part of this whole story. It's a piece of the puzzle that suggests a level of planning and sophistication that goes way, way beyond a small-time crook like James Earl Ray. I'm talking about the Canadian connection.
This is just wild. Okay, so months before the assassination, and remember, before he'd ever even been to Canada, Ray starts using the alias Eric Starvo Geit. Now, it just so happens there was a real guy in Toronto named Eric St. Vincent Geit, and the way he signed his name, his St. V, it looked a lot like Starvo. Then, the real Geit changes his signature to Eric S. Geit, and somehow, almost impossibly, at the exact same time, James R. Ray changes his alias to match it perfectly.
And if you think that's strange, it gets even weirder. Ray already looked a lot like the real Eric Geit. They both had scars over their eyes. And months before the murder, Ray actually got plastic surgery that made the resemblance even stronger. And the final piece? The real Eric Geit was a skilled marksman who was known to travel in the American South. I mean, you can't make this up. This feels like a setup.
So you have to ask yourself, how on earth could a small-time crook like Ray know all these tiny, intimate details about some random guy in a totally different country? The only theory that makes any sense is that this information came from a top-secret security file. The real Eric Geit worked for a defense contractor, and his file was held by Canadian intelligence, who, by the way, regularly shared information with the CIA.
So when you put it all together, the massive military presence, the security failures, the totally shoddy evidence, this impossibly complex Canadian plot, the idea that one guy, James or Ray, did all this on his own, it just doesn't hold up. The pillars of doubt are just too strong to ignore. You have that flood of intelligence agents into Memphis, the huge contradictions in the evidence against Ray, the elaborate Canadian aliases that point to a high-level intelligence operation, and the fact that the FBI, which had hounded King's every move for years, conveniently claimed to have called off all surveillance right before he was killed. It just doesn't add up.
And you have to remember, this wasn't some random act of violence out of the blue. The FBI itself admitted they knew of more than 50 separate threats against King's life right before he went to Memphis. So did they ramp up his security? No. It was systematically taken away. But maybe the most chilling piece of this entire puzzle is this memo, straight from the FBI, written less than a year before the murder. It calmly discusses the vacuum and chaos that would follow if King were, and I'm quoting here, exposed or assassinated. It even goes on to speculate about finding a clean leader to take his place. They were already planning for a world without him. All of which leaves us with the ultimate question. If James Earl Ray was just a dupe, a patsy, then who were his handlers? Who was the mysterious Raoul? Who had the power to coordinate military intelligence, local police, and sophisticated international aliases? Who really killed Martin Luther King Jr.? And does the full, unvarnished truth remain locked away, even today, in classified government files?